All right, just to jump into this one here, where we at 11:46 on Monday, 23rd of June. So I don't normally do the sort of Monday, well, the analysis videos anyway. I have obviously sort of in touch with the market, but between the weekend and Monday, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, when I normally get these ones out, not much has happened obviously normally, but it's kind of extenuating circumstances at the moment, of course. Excuse me, so we can sort of see how the market's sort of taken this most recent sort of, I guess, how do you want to call it, development, sort of the acts, the bombings from the US, and sort of see how the market's sort of reacting to it. Because in my opinion, it's not your textbook sort of reaction, and this is what I was sort of alluding to. Well, I wasn't alluding to it. I was just actually straight out saying it on the weekend review that it was going to be very telling what the market does, particularly with gold through this sort of period here. But we can see sort of like a little bit choppy with the chart here. But let's get onto the 4 hour. You can see this with the starting off with DXY. This is a very textbook sort of move here where we've got this big sort of falling resistance, which we've been respecting, just to bring anybody up to date, through the whole year. This big blue line coming down here. Every time it's hit this, it's reacted quite strong. As you can see, we did tap into it last week. The pullback was a little bit shallower, which is obviously a bit of a tell. But as I've sort of covered a number of times, 38%, 38%, 38%, even this pullback here is 38% of this move right off the lows, which is also the confluence of top side of the back test to the top side of that falling resistance, that little sort of horizontal that we'd set up. And now we've had a gap up this morning. It's I don't know if you want to say that's really closed the gap or not. Look, some people are a little bit finicky with these sort of things and say, look, it's got to be the body fill. I mean, obviously, this is where it closed, this is where it opened, that's where it came down to. You could say that this is actually technically a Friday candle, so that would be the top wick of that Friday candle, and it's obviously hit that and rejected back up here. So, look, for the time being, I'm going to say gap closed. We'll see how the market sort of takes this sort of thing, but you know, with the gaps just in very short, if it leaves it open, it's significant because it's a target for them to come back to later on. If you can say that, hey, look, you know what? Here's a wick, here's the high of that day, here's a low of this day. That's technically closed. There's no gap sort of between those two marks there. Not the body fills, obviously, in the close, but the wicks. And if it does run up here, that could be considered as gap closed, and on it goes with the run. But certainly, sort of like this was the expected move that we're going to see a bit of a bounce and a gap up off the sort of on the open with the US dollar off the back of everything that's sort of going on. And we've got the technicals to back it up here as well. So the significance of this 99.4, I actually just looked at this to clean the chart up and put it on the weekly here. You can sort of see if you drag this out here, you can see that this is our sort of like support area on a weekly time frame, which obviously sort of like, dipped down under, but it held it, bang, bang, came back down, held it, gave up here. If this moves up here now, you can see the significance of where we've got this alert at 99.4. If this breaks through here, you got a couple of things on the cards. One, we've got a little bit of a negative divergence. As you can see from this low down here to this low here, it's not massive, but it is a lower low. But look what the negative divergence. Yeah, so I was doing at the same time though. And look, it's not a massive one, but that's a negative divergence. And a negative divergence, obviously, or the reactions of these things are generally in proportion to the time frame that they're on, and the time frame that they're on is a weekly one here. So this could result in something pretty big. And this is just certainly, you can see, should it get back up above 99.4, this was a little bit of a resistance zone, unable to close above here. I'd say we have a pretty quick shot up towards sort of 100, 180. I think that's going to be a fairly tight little sort of squeeze area. Yeah, we're going to run into some resistance up over this area here. That's your sort of weekly kind of resistance here, unable to sort of close above that. But if we have a look back over here, this similar kind of instance where we had a support, this is a bigger sort of structural setup here. But look at the move that we had sort of come through here. Here's your lows, pull down a little bit low, nice little sort of support, drop down underneath, push down here. What was the RSI doing? There's a very subtle up there as well. But we had a negative divergence here, negative divergence here. Let's can we change all these ones for what it's worth. And obviously we can see the resulting action from that move. So I think it is very much worth sort of noting what's going on here, because 99.4, obviously where I've got that alert set up and what I've been touting the last couple of weeks, is going to be a significant level. And not only that, that you do potentially come up with this. Where's it gone? Oh, how can I do this? As a potential double bottom through this area over here. And obviously that'll take you back up over to these areas over here with the measured move. So I think there's, it's got to be very cautious if you're still short dollars here, because I think there could be the squeeze incoming. 99.4 is where the alert is. And yeah, we'll see how that sort of takes off. Flip on to gold quickly. I'm just going to fly through these charts and that. This is on the weekly. So I put out a standalone video last week sort of saying, look, this could potentially be a failed breakout, as we did have this kind of range. We broke up the top here and they sold straight into it. They're doing the same this morning. And this is a very significant bit of price action in my opinion. And I've got this alert set up down here underneath last week's low. If we take that out, I'd be cautious to be long on gold as well, because if we get onto a lower time frame here, you can see the price action that these guys have been running with. And this was the gap up last week. War happened. They gapped up, sold into it. Bombs shooting everything back and forth all through last week. They sold into it. America gets involved, gaps up tiny, runs up, sold into it. And just if we recap this, where's the other chart that we were using? This one here on the higher time frames. If we can see this here, this is the area. Oh, well, let's get onto the time frame here, where they were selling it at these zones. Remember, this is where tariff was driving gold at this point over here. Second effort, and they sold it, put in a lower high, and then this war came along, and the war comes along, they sell into it. America gets involved, they sell into it. And this is why I think it's quite significant. If we take out that low from last week, this is the 3 drive. You've now created a situation where you've broken this wedge, retesting the underside and looking to drive down. So your first target is 32.80 pretty much under here. You could probably see some little bit of support around this sort of 33.10 around this area here, but really the significant line to sort of see if you can close down underneath will be around here. Now that is the confluence of this little sort of like support that we saw sort of running up the top side over here. But I would say that you're definitely going to get some reaction there. I don't think this is going to chop straight through it if it does come down to this zone. I mean, first things first, you got to get down underneath that wick. But if you do, that's where you're targeting 32.80s. Excuse me, 32.80 and change. Expect a little bit of reaction, but should they drive at it a second time, then I think that's going to be opening up to a little bit more downside. And of course, this is another one. We're coming off that negative divergence, the rising wedge, the 3 drive. Now we've broken that rising support with a back test. Confirmation, lower low. Now that's what I always say. There's the 3 parts to these things. You have to break it, you back test it, and then you sort of start to move through to the downside. So certainly watching for that break of those lows of last week. Aussie played the game very well in the sense of buyers stepped in right as they should. They actually drove it straight up straight away. So look, this is the course of action. We should expect buyers around here. Why? Because we saw them back over here. We saw this whole sort of step up, step up, step up, step up. Most likely we're going to see chug, 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 chug down to the bottom side over here. But should we see US dollar break out, DXY, you got to remember that even though Aussie's not part of DXY, it's still going to be impacted, because use DXY as a barometer of US dollar attitude towards US dollar across the broad market. And if we see those things absolutely rip and sell US dollar, why would Aussie automatically be immune to it? In fact, it's going to be even more temperamental, because I've always said, look, one of the market's favorite pastimes is to sell Aussie dollar. And so they're like, oh, we're buying US dollar. Okay, who can we sell against it? Aussie, bang, that's a no-brainer. And it'll get smacked harder than probably a couple of these other ones here. So as you can see, small little rally attempt. And where did it come up to? Came up to where the support was. And this is what I say each time in that. So it's the cycle going through. So we broke the low. You target these lows, you break through. You find support, you bounce up. Where do you find resistance? Well, you find resistance at previous support because the people that thought this is going to hold, they've got a chance to get out for zero. They're like, oh, great, wow, I've got a chance to get out to zero. That adds to the selling pressure, pushes back down. You go through here, you're probably looking at the 63.90s levels next, where we saw some, so it hold quite a few times through here. So again, first things first, you've got to get through these levels, but as it looks like at the moment, it does look like it may want to roll over. We could sort of just consolidate around this period here. US dollar did just go for a breakout a moment ago and got smacked back, but I don't think that's going to hold it. As I said, look, I think we're looking at bigger time frame breakouts on US dollar. So to me, it's more a matter of when, not if. But, you know, we always need those sort of confirmations. 99.4, I think, is going to see quite a quick move. Move along, we've got silver. Silver's not really doing a great deal. We had this sort of significant level that we were looking at over Friday, and I was like, look, we break down under here, we're coming back down over here, bounce straight back up, and now it's just grinding again here. Look, as I said, I think if we see gold going down, if it breaks and starts to break low, I think it's going to drag silver with it. As to how far, I don't know. Like, I'm still looking for what happens in this rising support coming up through here. I think this is going to be a big tell for silver, whether this sort of breaks through, backtest, yada yada, or whether it moves up. I think even if it does move up here, I'd be looking to probably even sell it as it bounces back up here. You've got 14-year resistance across here. You've got sort of this rising wedge, which is also the top line that we saw from that big sell down just prior to April. I think this is the new wedge to play with. And as you can see, I've got my measured move marked out, and that pretty much takes you back down to that sell-off lows, which is quite significant, you know what I mean? Should that play out, I mean, look, it's always nice to just do these numbers, but let's actually have a look at it. That's, you know, that's looking at a sort of, 18% drop. Should that play out? And look, we'll get to that because obviously there's a lot of levels of support and a lot of things can happen in the mid, in between, but that's just where your measured move would sort of come to, should you sort of play out this sort of part. Gold cross, we've got copper, and copper's trying to sort of hold this area here. Same sort of thing, gap down, pushed up a little bit here. Still same thing I'm looking at as the weekend, 478, this little box. I think a close outside here opens you up to 470 for a test. I'd expect a little bit of a bounce here, but a second effort through this level here, I'd be looking a lot lower. And USD China, how's this one going? So gap up this morning. Sold back down in too quickly, going for a second effort. So same thing here, we got the alert set up here at 720. Go through 720, we're probably looking up to 722 and change kind of thing, as you can see. Quite a strong sort of support, resistance level here. And if you actually zoom out with that, that's that big support that we had sort of like for a couple of months going through here, where it was testing that fake little breakout up the top over there. So I think sort of like, this is obviously quite a strong thing. It's tried to get back into it a number of times. Poked its head up here 1 second, then gets slapped back down. But it's been a while down here now. I mean, we're looking at this chart stopped working. That's great. All right, let me pause this one. Oh no. Oh, okay. Seems like we're having some technical difficulties. 2 seconds. All right, so back. Not quite sure what happened there. But yeah, I mean, if you have a look at this, there's a bang down underneath the zone here. It's what, 48 days or so, 49, 50 days or so. I'd say 49 days that we've been down under this zone here. I mean, look, if it was going to break down, this kind of would have been the time. But if we do see that US dollar buying across the board, pushing back up here, I think there's a good chance now that we've sort of tapped into it a number of times. Maybe another one sort of here. Obviously, this was the time I thought it was going to come up, a little bit of a bounce back and then go through. Came right down the bottom here. It's obviously found its range down here. Same sort of price action here is what I'm looking for. A break up to the top here, back test, and then a second effort through this zone here. But I think once you go through 723, I think sort of like you're opening up to these other levels through here, which is going to weigh on Aussie, which will add to a little bit more Aussie downside. All right, that's it from me.